So I've been on a little bit of a theme of late, the last couple of videos about logic. And it all kind of started with this reading I was doing about Socrates and his, the dilemma of the will, I think is what he called it. But this idea that any action we take, any decision, anything we do is a calculation. And we do the thing that is ranked higher in that calculation. The way I would put it is like a cost-benefit analysis. And we always go with the thing that wins. Sometimes our inputs are off. So our assessment is off, right? That could change over time. You can grow, you could change as a person, your circumstance could change. So the decisions, the guiding principles of them could change, but it's always a calculation. And in that light, aside from like a mental illness, there's never anything that's done or anything that anybody could ever do, almost by definition, that's illogical. In that moment, it's logical. It's a cost benefit. The thing that comes out higher, you do. It's almost the epitome of logic. So that's taken me down a path of thinking about logic a lot and what it is and what it means. And I've talked before that, I have kind of my own definition of logic. So I'll touch on that a little bit. But I think more important, the concept here that I'm thinking about with it is, what exactly is it? And I was having a conversation with somebody, and their definition of it was more around the idea that it's something that humans developed. It's a construct that humans developed to rationalize what they do. And my first reaction to that was disagreement, I guess, because of the human development part. I had never thought of it in that way before, but it made me realize that I don't believe it's a human-made thing. It's something that's existed it's a natural thing that's always been there. So there was some disagreement to it. But then my thought was like, it's close though to what I would say, because I don't think logic explains, or logic is used to rationalize what people do. I think logic dictates what people do. So there's definitely a strong connection point between the two, but it's a slightly different connection. And as I say, I believe logic is almost like a universal principle, right? It's a principle that governs the universe, that things happen logically. Not always, but that's kind of the rule. Almost like a gravity would be a rule. Now, there's always exceptions to every rule. I don't know enough about gravity to know what those exceptions are, so maybe that's a bad example. But I believe, by and large, nature, evolution, everything happens for a reason. We evolve in a very logical way as animals. The nature or the way in which nature works, it all fits together and it makes sense. The way the trees develop and plants develop and how they process the carbon dioxide and the oxygen's needed for animals, it all works beautifully logically. So I can't believe, it's possible, but my view of it is that I couldn't think of logic as something that humans created. It's there already. And the way it plays out or manifests in humans is in this cost-benefit analysis. Again, short of a mental illness where there's a defect there, you have no ability to think logically. When a healthy mind, quote unquote, you will do the thing that's logical to you in that moment. If you're choosing between a bowl of broccoli and a bowl of candy, you may understand theoretically that broccoli is healthier for you, but if in that moment you'd rather have candy for whatever reason, you're craving it, you haven't had it in a while, whatever the reason is, it smells better, you're doing the logical thing. So I've kind of talked about that. It makes me wonder what's the implication of that? If you believe that logic is a universal principle that governs everything around us in many ways, it's there in everything. What does that mean? And I guess sticking with the conversation I was having, one of the things that was asked, because to kind of challenge the idea that logical is, in my definition, was, how do you explain love? How do you explain some of these other phenomenon that seem to be illogical? I would throw religion or something like that in there, right? That seems to be an illogical thing, a lot of people would say. A cult, right? Joining a cult, those types of things. And my answer is, it's still logical. We may not like the output. It may not, through our framework, right? Our societies, whatever, framework and value system, it may seem wrong, but it's happening in a logical manner, the way in which it happens, right? So take love as an example. My view of that would be logic is what drives love, right? Love is a result of, you could say, or tied to love. Let's not even try and define love. Let's assume that's something you can't define. But what's tied to love is something positive, right? You love that thing because there's a benefit there. Think of it in terms of the cost benefit analysis. There's at least a low enough cost and enough of a benefit to being around this person, to being in a relationship with this person, that you want to maintain it. And when the cost benefit goes really high in the favor of the benefit, you could argue that's what love is. Like, I need to be around this person. I want to ensure I could be around this person as much as I can. It brings me such joy, whatever that might be. They make you laugh. They're beautiful. It's just some chemical reaction that it just makes you happy to be around them. It feels good physically. Whatever it is, you're optimizing for that benefit. And you could say that's what love is. And if you think of it in that way, again, there's kind of a deep-rooted, pure, fundamental logic in that. And it works exactly the way that it should. And then can people fall out of love? Well, again, it doesn't really matter what love is, but if that feeling goes away, if that benefit that seems so high comes down for whatever reason, the other person cheated on you, they don't look the same as they did when you first got married, you've changed as a person and the things you value are different, whatever it is, when that equation changes, well, now you no longer love that person anymore. Again, very, very logical in many ways. I speak about religion too as something that I think about. And I bring up religion because I think religion is typically something where you would think it's an oxymoron to say, logical belief in religion. Almost by definition, it's a leap of faith. By all accounts, most people would agree that there's no definitive proof that God exists. Therefore, you would say believing in God is illogical. Well, maybe, right? If the framework you use is to say that things are deemed logical just based on the fact if they are exactly true or accurate as they're portrayed. If that's the gauge of if somebody's thinking logically, well, then I could see why you would say that. But if you think of logic in more this pure form, where it just dictates what we do, and it provides a guidance for us to achieve the things we want to achieve. We pick the thing we want, right? There's no mistakes. We pick the thing we want. Well, in some ways, you could think of religion as very logical then, right? If people, and we'll even leave aside like the power dynamic of people that are in power when it comes to religion and what that yields. But if an individual person wants to be a better person, right? They aspire to be somebody better. And let's say they've done the deep soul searching, they've gotten into the mud, they've thought through it, and they say, you know what, I'm living not the lifestyle I want to be living. There's some pleasure in it for sure. That's why I've been doing it. It feels good. Maybe I party a lot or I do drugs or whatever. There's some pleasure in that, but my equation's changed, and I've now realized that I don't want that lifestyle anymore. I want something better. I want something that I could be more proud of, whatever it is, whatever the framework that person's using. Well, if you think of it in that way, religion can become an extremely valuable and logical tool to help you reach that objective. If you can convince yourself or genuinely, come to a belief that there's a person in the sky who's determined the rules and you need to follow them, and that's what it means to live a good life, and those rules align somewhat with what you want to be as a person, right? You kind of fall into that where you say, I don't want to hurt people. I don't want to be mean to people. I don't want to cheat on my wife. I don't want to murder anybody. These things all seem in line with what you learn from, let's just say, Catholicism. That's how I was brought up. And do unto others as you want to be treated. If all those things feel like, hey, that's what a good person is, well, what better way to get yourself to start acting that way than believing that God is real, and that he or she has laid out the rules, and you should follow them. In some ways, it's the perfect motivational tool if you can get it to work for you. And I don't doubt some people really believe God is up in the sky or what have you. And I can't say for certain that there isn't a God in the sky. So some people may believe that and take that leap of faith. Some people may will themselves more into it. Some people may be, to an extent, lying to themselves and just trying to fake it till you make it, wanting to believe that. Whatever the thing is, if it gets you the result that you want, it's logical. Even if somebody deliberately realized that, if I just fake it till I make it and believe God is real, I can perhaps convince myself or trick my mind, if you will, into going this path. It may work for a while. Or maybe you eventually start to really believe it and it converts and it becomes something that is a lifestyle that lasts with you forever. I see value in that. And I see logic in that doesn't have anything to do with the fact necessarily if you can prove it or if it's real or if science can, assess it. So, I think the big takeaway here is that you have to think of logic in, at least, with this hypothesis that I have, not saying it's a definitive thing, but you have to think of logic as deeper, broader, more fundamental than maybe I typically did. And it helps you to kind of unlock and see a lot of the truths and things, right? You start to recognize that even if you don't like something or it doesn't seem in line with what you would expect, or in the religion case where you say, but how could it be logical? It's not logical has to mean it's real and true. Well, maybe not. Maybe logical just has to mean that it makes sense, right? It logically makes sense and it plays out the way that it should. And again, back to the person, not to beat a dead horse, but if that person truly wants to be a better person and religion is the most valuable tool, it's the most logical tool then to use, and you should use it regardless of if it's real or not. Now we can get into a debate if it's really not real and you're just lying to yourself. How long can you sustain that, right? I think logic would kick in there too, and eventually you'd have some issues. But I think what it speaks to about what logic is and maybe how to think about it a little bit differently is probably the key takeaway.